Welcome to Conversations in the Time of Quarantine with Charlie Shaughnessy. Today, we are pleased to have special guest Ricardo Rodriguez here with us for a conversation about life, work, and the pandemic's impact both personally and professionally. Like Charlie, Ricardo is a longtime supporter of the Robert F. Kennedy Children's Action Corps. As the principal at Ricardo Rodriguez Associates at Coldwell Banker, Ricardo has been recognized as the #1 Latino agent in the U.S. and one of only 18 global luxury ambassadors. He's a member of the International Luxury Alliance, and his work has been recognized in Boston Magazine's Best of Boston. The pandemic has changed life and work dramatically for all of us. At RFK, our direct care staff are considered essential workers and have continued to provide in-person support to the young people in our residential programs 24/7. Others, like our educators, youth advocates, and mentors, have shifted to primarily virtual delivery of programs and services. Most check in daily with our kids and make themselves available by phone, text, or email around the clock because the kids' safety and well-being is a huge concern when you can't see them in person. Our staff are standing by them and doing amazing work at a time when their own lives are filled with additional challenges and unknown. We are so lucky to have them. Charlie and Ricardo, the two of you also stand by our kids in so many ways as well. Thank you for your commitment. We know you have much to share about your own experiences these past months, so let's dive in.
Hi, thank you, Anna. Thank you very much for that great introduction. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in again. As Anna said, my guest today, someone I am so thrilled to introduce to you all, an extraordinary young man. He is a Coldwell Banker Global Luxury Ambassador. He is the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals #1 Latino agent in the United States. He's Coldwell Banker's #1 team in New England, and he is Real Trends WSJ, one of their top 100 agents in the United States. He's an extraordinary achiever in his chosen profession. He's an extremely generous and giving man in his spare time to the children at RFK Children's Action Corps. And an all-around great guy. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Ricardo Rodriguez. Welcome, Ricardo.
Charlie, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. You're so
thank you for being here. It's always good to sort of boost the guest when they're
you absolutely did.
But you know
what? My mom must be here right now.
It's so impressive. And forgive me if I've got this wrong, but am I right in saying you arrived in this country without speaking the language and with like $25 in your pocket?
Yes, that is actually factually correct. It was a long time ago. It was early 90s. Yeah. I was young. That's when you do things like that.
That's like 10 to 15 years after I got here, and your achievements are a lot greater. And it's a remarkable story because it's something I wanted to talk about today. It's like you personify the American dream, the idea of, this country, as we've talked a lot about recently, the sort of national conversation, a country built on immigrants, unless you're Native American, and in some cases, really Native American, the only indigenous people here. So everyone else is an immigrant, and your story to get where you are now from those beginnings, you must have had enormous self-confidence. I love this word. I'm an honorary Jew. My wife is Jewish, so I can say it. Great chutzpah to know that you can actually not just make it and survive, but thrive the way you did. To what do you attribute that?
Well, again, thank you very much for the very, very nice and generous comments. Listen, I believe my story is no different from any other immigrant that has come to this country, whether it's recently or 100 years ago. There's really no difference because the story is a story about opportunity, and it's a story about finding your place in the world, about finding your life, about finding your tribe, finding yourself. And so I am no different than anybody else that has come to this country, or for that matter, to any other country. I think that what this country has given me are opportunities, and certainly. Again, the opportunities are there. I would tell you very humbly, I have outworked anybody and outperformed anything that was ever expected, but the opportunities were there. And so I think that that's what makes this country so special, that the opportunities are there, and the opportunities are for you to take them and for you to thrive within them. I think it is, you know, where the issue lies is who those opportunities are given to, and where those opportunities land. And so we know that the opportunities are not equally distributed, that the opportunities are not there for everybody. And so sometimes you just have to find them, fight for them, you know, stick to, you know, to your gut and go for things, you know?
So without wanting to get, you know, directly political, one has to mention it. What do you know, this country from time to time does go through these kind of waves of anti-immigrant sentiment, whether it be Irish or the Italians or Jewish or Hispanic or whatever. What do you attribute that to? Because as you so rightly say, this is what the country is, a country of opportunities for people arriving here and then not just making a life for themselves, but making a life for the country, contributing to the betterment of the United States. So what do you attribute this kind of rise in anti-immigrant sentiment to?
Yeah, well, you know, how could I'm trying to respond this in the most kind of like honest, you know, manner. I do think that the anti-immigrant sentiment is not specific to this country. I think it is, to some extent, there's human nature to it, right? It's like we fight against anything that is different, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's gender, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's religion. And so this anti-something, I think to some extent, you know, to our detriment, it's kind of like embedded in our DNA. And so I have never felt scared of anti-immigrant sentiments. I think that what we have, right, because it's all about a conversation, I think. You know, if you're anti-gay, as long as I can have my voice as a gay person and we can have a conversation, and as long as you know that you're treating me as a human, as a fellow human being with different opinions, we have a table to sit at. And I think that the difference right now is that the difference in the past, particularly in the past 2 years, is how it's not just that we have become anti-immigrant, but we have dehumanized people. I would tell you that, again, no reason to. This is not about getting political, because this has nothing to do with being
on a part of that thing,
right?
I always put it down to tribalism. I think this word tribalism is so useful because, you know, it's fear and antipathy to the other. And I always give this example. I'm a great soccer fan. I love English football. And, you know, I'd go and support my team, Chelsea, who wear blue. And our big enemies wear white, the other London team, which is Tottenham. And I'll see a game. And for that afternoon, if you're wearing a white shirt, you are my enemy. And I will see one of your players trip up one of my players. And I will want the referee to throw them out of the game. But if my player in blue does exactly the same thing to your player, then it's okay. Mm-hmm. He can do it because he's one of my guys. And I think that's really goes to the heart of it, that it's we as human beings, and you said it at the beginning, we just have this fear of anything that isn't us, and to make a team or a religion or a nation or a belief system, and then villainize and demonize the other. And it just so happens that immigrants can be one label, you know, Democrat, Republican, another one, a particular religion, whatever it might be. And what we have to do is rediscover that humanity that gets us together, as you so right say. And then all those labels disappear.
You're absolutely right, Charlie. It goes, to me, it just goes to a sense of humanity and a sense of a moral compass. Again, I think that having differences is fine. I think that, you know, confronting difference is fine. I think you know, trying to trying to, to debate issues and positions, it's fine as long as we acknowledge the other person across from that table
and
is a human being. And I think that's what we have lost, in my opinion. I think that, to me, it was, in 2018 when those children were put in cages, to me that was a changing on everything, because we don't do that to human beings. We do that to human beings when we are trying to dehumanize them. And to me, that's what changed everything, at least in my opinion. I'm debating anything that you want with me, as long as I have a fair opportunity to debate it. But when you are going to treat particularly children as if they were animals, which is horrendous, I think that that's where we cross the line. And that's
crossing the line, exactly. There comes a point where debate no longer works, and you have to take action, or at least protest rather than debate it. Well, let's switch gears now, because you once said in an interview that I am my biggest asset, you said, which struck me as a really interesting thing to say, and I kind of, in my profession, feel the same way, which we can talk about in a bit. But can you explain what you meant by that when you said I am my greatest asset?
Well, it was within the context of real estate, so
exactly, professionally. I should have said same with me, professionally. What do you mean in terms of real estate in your profession? What did you mean?
Well, real estate I've discovered real estate is a business of relationships. It's a business of connection. It's a business of storytelling. And so only you can tell your own story. Only you can build those stories around the properties. Only you can build those things. So you are your best asset, because the business corresponds to you. Again, when you look at my life story plus what I am doing for business, they almost don't match. I don't, to some extent, I rightfully don't belong in the business that I do, but it is my ability to articulate what I do, my value proposition, who I am, that has provided me those opportunities to grow in the business in the manner in which I have. Again, I'm always, and I mean this, I'm very humble about it, because what I have been able to accomplish is very minimal in relationship to some other amazing people doing the same business that I am. So I know that it's extraordinary for me, maybe not necessarily in the context of the rest of the world, but I do know that the reason why I've been able to do what I have done is because I have owned it, and it belongs to me, for better or for worse. Whether I thrive, whether I don't, it belongs to me. But that is the beauty about real estate. I think what real estate offers people, and I've said this before, and I know you've heard me, Charlie, saying this before, is that real estate is a very egalitarian business, because everybody has an opportunity to do it as long as they find a way to do it, and as long as they find their voice. And so that's why I think you have such diversity within the business in itself. And so you have people from all walks of life really just, providing this one specific service, and it has to do with the fact that you just have to bring yourself. Listen, I came to this country with $25 in my pocket. Again, I barely speak English still. I never graduated, I never went to college. To do what I do, to have to build a business like the one that I have right now, certainly it only happened maybe in your field, Charlie, in the arts, or, and if one is super talented as you are, you make it in the arts. But I think aside from the arts, maybe it's in real estate, where you have that opportunity of being able to project who you are, and to bring it to the table.
Right. I was thinking, and I know that you've been an actor for a while, so you would recognize this, that if you take a property as an audition, say I have a scene as an audition, and that's that's the property, and there's a bunch of us trying to sell that particular scene, and then I bring me to the property, to the audition, and inject my personality and my skill set and who I am, the way that I read that scene. That is an important part. It's a marriage of the personality and the product. In my case, a dramatic scene. In your case, a commercial property, or a property, residential property, whichever it might be. And then the marriage of your personality and that makes the sale, actually, makes the deal. So it is, I can see, definite parallels with that, and telling my story through the scene, and you telling your story, and your stories about the property, and that's what creates the magic.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's a storytelling business, believe it or not. It's a marketing and storytelling business.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
and when you started in real estate, presumably in kind of low end properties. Was that how it works? And then you sort of moved up into higher end markets.
You know, your business is very related to your sphere of influence, like your network of people, and so depending on, you know, the business take different forms depending on you know, on who's part of that sphere. You know, in my case, you know, I was, again, this is 16 years ago, so I was much younger, and I was breaking into, you know, into a business completely new to me. I've never had any experience on anything that had to do with sales. You know, I was an actor, and I had been doing some sort of like social marketing, but I never, but I was never on the sales kind of like business, and so. And so, you know, I in my experience, I actually, what I decided very early on is I wanted to get onto the new construction arena. I happen to love design. I love architecture. I think that if I would have been given opportunities, you know, I would have been an architect most likely. I actually do. I'm passionate about it. I love it. And then I figure out, you know what, if I'm going to build this business, I'm going to build in a way that I love to do it. And so I incorporated that design and that architecture into it. And so the niche that I found the most appropriate was new construction. And so I met with as many developers as, you know, as would take, you know, an appointment with me, and I would pitch myself. You know, 99 out of the 100, you know, laughed me out of the door, but one of them listened, and a few months later called me and said, you know what, we have an opportunity for you. And so I started, of course, with, you know, with the entry level, but the new construction offered me an opportunity, offered me a completely different stage, and so I was able to really build upon those different opportunities that I was offered, and continue to grow kind of like my business. And again, I think that I still have opportunity to grow in every single aspect of it. You know, to me, the sky is the limit, and so. For me, it's about strategy and about how do I use what I'm given as a business opportunity to get the next one and to grow and to, you know.
Did you find that the people you worked with at the beginning of your career, they stuck with you, you stuck with them, and that you've sort of grown together, or, you know, do you kind of move out from that and onwards?
Yeah. So, you know, I actually, if you got my mailing list, if you got like my core mailing list is the same 250 people that I've had now for 16 years. And those are the people that 16 years later are still providing me with the majority of my business. And I would say that I could literally, if I had the time to literally track down every single referral that I have received, most likely I could narrow it down to 5-10 people.
5 people, right.
16 years ago. So it is that, you know, we were discussing, Charlie, earlier, this business of relationships and this business of, you know, of creating that connection.
Relationships, right, exactly. And knowing, you know, this is the same in my business. A lot of directors, producers, they like to work with the same people. They know that there's 10, 15 equally talented people out there, but if they have a relationship with someone and they trust them because they've had a good experience, then they'll come back to that well. And so you kind of build up a mutual trust, client and.
No, absolutely. You know, that developer that I mentioned to you earlier, the first building, I'm still with that same group. They're dear friends.
Yeah.
And it's the most amazing relationship. You know, it's great to work with friends, and it's great to build something together. You know what I mean?
Right. How's the pandemic hit you? Because, you know, presumably you can't do many, you know, actually on-site personal showings, or are you able to do that? Has most of it had to move online?
Well, it's changed. You know, at the beginning, the first 3 to 4 months, we moved into pretty much 100% remote kind of like show. So we will go and we will do not only our regular marketing videos and photos, but we will do this very, you know, elaborate kind of like video tours, and we will take people on a Zoom call, and we did transactions through that. But then as we had more access out into the world, what we do is we adhere to very, you know, specific safety regulations, require masks,
Right.
what do you call this? I always forget the name of it. The liquid.
Protocols, like the protocols, safety
Yeah,
protocols.
all the protocols. Yes, exactly. All the safety protocols, social distance, all of that stuff. And so we are able to go into people's homes
Right.
safely. Yes. Yeah.
But
it's
it's tricky. I know it's tricky for all. We're all having to work on this new normal. Here's a question I have. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's a sort of pretty general philosophical view. Because, we talked earlier about the American dream, and part of that dream was home ownership, and how important having a home was not just putting a roof over your family's head, but it was an investment in the future. It was the way to accumulate wealth that you could pass on. So it was very much part of that American dream. Would you say now that in certain parts of the country, it's not obviously everywhere, but there are certain areas where the prices of real estate, for whatever reason, whether it's population or it's become a kind of investment of the rich, the people that buy and flip, and it's becoming less and less possible for average income families to purchase their own home in some places. And is therefore kind of undermining a key component of that hopefulness of the American dream, that kind of vision of making your way and increasing your wealth and becoming more and more of a participant in the upside of the American dream. Would you say that was an accurate assessment? And where do you think it goes from here? Do you think there'll be an adjustment, or is that just what we have to get used to?
No, it needs to change. This absolutely needs to change, because I think you're absolutely right. When you look at the wealth gap between different populations, right? It's staggering. I'm trying to find the number, but I think it was something like and I think it's in Massachusetts, and please don't quote me on this, but the average wealth of a black family is like $8, of a white family is $170,000. But most of that really comes from real estate, because real estate is really a way of producing generational wealth. And is that, listen, even my grandparents in Colombia, right? They bought that house back in the, 30s or 40s. They lived in there for 50 years. Then when they passed away, my mom and her sisters and brothers sold it. And then they split the proceeds from that. And my mom used that money to put down, down payment into her next house. And that's the house that is going to go to my nieces and nephews. And so it is really the way in which we build wealth multi-generationally. I think that there is this misconception that you buy a house, you change the toilet, and you make $100,000, because that's kind of like the HGTVization of the world, right? But that's not what real estate is about. Real estate is about long-term investment. And so what we need to do is work. I think it's a two-pronged thing. I think the first one is to work into those options for more affordability in terms of the housing that we are producing, and more opportunities. And that takes a partnership, obviously, between development and the real estate world, but also public institutions and government. It's not going to happen if it's just left to the general market to do it. That's got to be a collaboration that includes some sort of institutional and governmental work. That's one. And then the second one is, we need to talk to people about this. We need to tell them, you need to prepare for home ownership, so that is responsible and long-term home ownership. You mentioned the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. They have a whole platform that is built around building wealth around real estate, and it's about preparing people for home ownership. We need to replicate platforms like that to really be applied across all of these populations that are not being benefited by by real estate. And so
Right.
it is about building that. It's really talking to people, helping people be prepared for home ownership, so that it is responsible, and so that it makes sense within their long-term plans, and so that it becomes something that, again, as we discussed earlier, becomes a multi-generational investment.
And I think, the local authorities have to be part of that conversation, because apart from the investment in future wealth, there's also the investment in community. You know,
Yes.
renters are less likely to be connected and invested in their community because they might move at any moment. They may get kicked out. The landlord might want to change the building. So the only way to feel confident about investing in your community, in your local infrastructure and schools and everything else, is to be a homeowner in that community. So people talk about the breakdown in community now. Well, the breakdown in home ownership is directly, for my money, directly feeds into the breakdown in communities, because people don't feel an allegiance. As you say, there's not a generational presence. We have in my community around here, when I moved in 10 years ago, I would think 70 to 80% of the people living around here were multi-generational. They'd been here, their grandparents were here. And now, in just 10 years, that's very different. I would say it's less than 50%. And most of those houses have been knocked down and the big mansions are built. And sometimes those mansions are third homes or fourth homes. Someone wants a billionaire on the East Coast wants a West Coast house that they'll buy. They live in it for 6 months, if that, 2 months of the year. And that's bad for the community.
Yes. Yeah. It's again, it is, we talked earlier about opportunities, and I think it's about building those opportunities and creating those opportunities for that to happen. I think that if you look at historically, again, for Latinos, again, we have maybe like a shorter tenure, within the country as a sizable population. But when you look at some of the policies that were put in place for African Americans, things like redlining, when you actually look at some of the impact of foreclosures on African Americans, let's say during the last recession, the high percentage of African Americans that lost their homes because they were given real subprime products, and those were deliberate attempts to do that. I think that's what we need to work on. We need to work making sure that we have opportunities for people to engage onto the homeownership, system, like you said, into the homeownership community, because it builds. I agree with you. It builds community. It creates long-term relationships. It also creates a sense of belonging.
Right.
If you own your home, this is where you're going to be. Doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I remember when in Colombia, again, people would buy a tiny little piece of land and build a little shack, but it was theirs. And I think that's
theirs, exactly. And then you're more likely to want to take care of it and take care of the community. You don't want it to get trashed. You don't want too much graffiti, because you have pride in it. It's your home, rather than just something you're passing through on a 1-year rent or something. You use the word opportunity a lot, Ricardo, and I know you and I met when you very kindly gave us one of your beautiful condos for a fundraiser at the RFK Children's Action Corps a couple of years ago now. I think myself and Jack Maxwell came and entertained. There we are. And I know that you've done a lot with RFK, and that's all about opportunity. It's about children who don't have the opportunities that a lot of other kids have, and trying to sort of inject oneself into their lives and give them that opportunity, present them with opportunities to turn their lives around from a total lack of opportunity. Is that when and how did you first get involved in that?
Oh my God, I've been involved with RFK for a long time. I was actually introduced to a mutual friend, Tom Rosa, who's unbelievable in this organization. He really spearheads so many initiatives around the organization. But I was introduced to Tom through somebody else who used to, Lisa Sikora, that used to work in the organization doing development. And she's who introduced me to it. And we started doing some sort of like fundraising. My husband and I, Michael and I, started doing like this, kind of like light fundraising for the organization. And then we really very quickly understood the importance of it, because it wasn't even about second chances. It's just some of these kids and families weren't never even given a first chance. And so it was really about about just fostering all of these opportunities and fostering this ability for people to find themselves and find their place in the world. And then not just the kids, but their families and the effect that it had in their communities. It's really extraordinary. And then when you look at the people that are part of it, the people that have dedicated themselves as supporters or as mentor, part of the programs, or as, in all sorts of levels, you realize the impact that it has in the community, because you see the depth of that relationship that many of us have with the organization. And it's because
Right.
it is a really valuable organization. I'm sure it's the same experience for you, Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just trying to level a playing field a little teeny bit that starts off so unlevel for these families. As you say, it's not just the children, because it impacts the whole family. But their opportunities are so minuscule or invisible, even, because the playing field is so sloped against them. It's just trying to at least steady it a little bit so that these kids can actually get an education, actually be part of a community, actually recognize their own self-worth, which we take for granted, but for some people it's absolutely not to be taken for granted. And also I got involved because it's valuable in purely mercenary terms. It's saving the community so much money. I always say this when I'm trying to appeal to donors, that it's in your financial interest to support something like this, because if a child at 10 years old slips into the judicial system, goes to juvenile court, it's more likely they're going to go to prison when they're a teenager. It's more likely they're going to, through recidivism, spend most of their life behind bars. And not only is that costing the taxpayer millions of dollars through a wasted life, but it's also a wasted life, a lifetime of paying taxes and contributing to the community. So if you add up, the cost, you could make a donation of $5 million to RFK and still come out ahead in terms of what it costs to lose one of these children. So for me, it always seems both a moral imperative, a social imperative, political imperative, and a financial imperative.
Yeah, and like you said, from a moral point of view, there is no reason for any of these young people to go through that. There is no reason for it. There are options. There are better options. And I think that's what the RFK provides, in my opinion, provides those options outside from, like you said, ruining someone's life,
Right. Well, let's bring in someone who knows more about this than us, Anna DiBiase, who's going to join us now. Anna, hi.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Now, your official title is?
Yeah, so I'm Director of Development for the Robert F. Kennedy Children's Action Corps. And my background has been both in programs and trauma-informed care. So I've gotten to see like a lot of different sides of this coin.
Right.
So it's interesting.
I brought you in because I got a bunch of questions that came in from listeners, and I want to run some of these by because they directly affect the RFK. One of them was I talked to Ricardo about the challenges of this pandemic and how his business has had to change. Certainly my business has had to change dramatically. What are the biggest challenges for what you do with the kids posed by the pandemic, by both the protocols and the distancing, but also the quarantining and the shutdown thing?
Yeah, that thing that we're all dealing with. I was kind of reflecting on this today, and our kids are in really good hands because our staff are all trained to sort of view behaviors and view sort of caring for our youth through a trauma-informed lens, right? So trauma can be any kind of event that threatens your physical or emotional safety, right? And so essentially we've all been going through that with the pandemic. And so there's themes around that, like, safety being number one priority, and talking about what we can control, and collaboration, over sort of telling the kids what's best for them, information sharing in a way that is helpful and helps you understand what's happening, but then doesn't sort of create more anxiety. So So as I was thinking about this, our staff are already trained in all of that, and all of that is almost sort of heightened to a new level for all of us. So I was just really thinking that, if you want to be in anybody's, in the care of anyone right now, it's somebody who understands all of those pieces of trauma, as we're sort of collectively going through that with the pandemic, and also with, the reckoning on race. I mean, racial injustice is traumatic within itself. So there's some really interesting themes.
And so some of your staff, are they all working remotely, or are they in sort of face-to-face with some of the programs with the kids? How's that? Is that sort of a bit of both?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we run different programs. So we do have some residential settings, so congregate care settings where the staff have been, working in person with the kids. The kids live there. So they are truly our frontline workers, and they have just been incredibly flexible and creative, and keeping safety at the forefront of their daily activities with the kids. Then we also do run some schools. So schooling, as most parents have been going through, has had a lot of changes and challenges for some kids. What's interesting is I think some of our teachers are seeing that virtual learning. We're doing some hybrid learning, like a lot of schools are doing. But it's been interesting to see the kids. Some of the kids are really thriving on virtual learning. Maybe there's a little less pressure for sort of the social skills and the eye contact and kind of that piece. Whereas, sometimes the kids who are more higher functioning in person, the virtual could be more of a challenge. So like everything we do at RFK, everything's individually sort of customized for what each kid needs. So our staff have been equipped.
Yeah, and I would think some kids are more, it's easier for them to access sort of the tools for virtual learning, to have a quiet place and a good internet connection and the ability to get on Zoom must be easier for some than others, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing that across the country, sort of inequities to sort of internet access and all of that. I will say the districts are doing what they can to make sure that the kids have access to the technology they need.
Right. And are there any particular stories you want to share with us about how some challenges that were met with imagination and creativity? Because that's one of the things that I'm impressed by all of us in this, and I'm sure, Ricardo, it's the same for you, is the ability of human beings to adapt.
Yeah.
We're so quick. We don't think about it until something happens, and then suddenly our normal is no longer normal, and we do adapt quite quickly. And some of the stories of people turning their entire business to an online business, the restaurants suddenly switching overnight to takeout and actually doing very well sometimes because they're able to focus on that. And as you say, sometimes with these kids who, absent the pressure, the social pressure of school and what they're showing up, what clothes they're showing up in, and how they're comporting themselves around that. Once that's taken off the board, they can adapt to a much more focused form of learning. Have there been any stories that you're aware of that demonstrate that kind of creativity and improvisation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably been the most challenging for our community-based programs. So programs where kids, live at home, but would typically meet in person with our staff. For instance, our DDAP program, which is our Detention Diversion Advocacy Program. So kids who are in sort of an advocate mentorship relationship, they're really missing that in-person contact. And sort of like the outings that they would typically have. But, those staff have been really creative with, like all of us, Zoom has become, part of everybody's daily skills. And I think it's actually been a good learning experience for the kids now. They're all comfortable with using virtual, meetings and that sort of thing. And, thinking about ways to help keep the kids active. I know we had a worker deliver like a little personal trampoline to one of the girls who, I think like all of us was experiencing some cabin fever and needed to move her body a little bit to feel better. And so they special delivered a trampoline to her. So, masks on and everything. So, they're just doing everything that they can. And I think flexibility is at the core of just kind of taking it a day at a time right now.
Have you, Ricardo, have you talked to the kids at any time, like a sort of, I don't want to call it a career day, but do they, have you ever talked to them about real estate as a potential career or anything like that?
I have the opportunity. Yes, I have the opportunity to have the conversation with some of the of the kids.
The older ones.
Yeah, older ones. Yes, and it was of course a lot of questions, a lot of interest in it. There's a lot of curiosity as to how it kind of like operates. And I remember always being a very kind of like a wonderful experience, to get all the questions and all of those inquiries.
Right.
But is it okay if I ask Anna a question? Yeah?
Sure.
Anna, I'm just wondering, as things are changing, are you noticing any kind of like emerging needs that we were not aware of? Again, from staying home, but is there anything that has changed that we should be paying attention to as to how we might continue to provide services to these families and kids?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, like so many businesses who are operating right now, everything is a little bit more expensive, to keep things, as sanitized and to have the personal protective equipment and all of that. We are just seeing an impact in sort of our daily operations. And so things like just supporting our general annual fund, which goes to support our organization-wide programming. That sort of generalized support right now is really important and really makes an impact right now. As far as our services, everything's still it's still operating, but again, it's just within these new constraints. So
if anyone wants to check out more about both the programs and the services, but also if they want the opportunity to give a donation and support, they can go to rfkchildren.org. There we go. That's the website, and you can click around the tabs. Anyone who's joining us the first time, that's you'll be able to see the wonderful stuff that the agency does and how much they do for the kids and the community. So I recommend you check that out.
Donate, everyone.
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. How did by the way, how did the ride go? How did what was the results of the Rodman ride? How was that?
Great. Yeah. So we had what would have been our sort of annual in-person ride, which was a virtual ride this year. And actually the fundraising deadline is November 1st. So we still have, although the sort of virtual ride date passed, we've got some teams that are still raising money for us.
Right.
So look at that. Those are some great shots. So our riders and our supporters really came through this year because, of course, we didn't have that fun day of being able to get together in person. But we are on our way to hitting our goal, and that's exciting right now because hitting fundraising goals right now, I think everybody is up against a challenge right now.
My phone, I just can't even look at my phone now. It's like 101, asks in the first, half an hour of turning it on. It's just insane. So we kind of have to just get through the next week or so.
Exactly.
And then start focusing on what we really want to be focusing on. Good. I think is there any other questions? Anyone who's listening and wants to ask a question for Ricardo, myself, or Anna, please, you can do so on the chat, I believe, right? And that will go in. So one final question I wanted to ask you, Ricardo, and actually this goes to you too, Anna. Where would you guys, in an ideal world, what would you like to be doing in 10 years' time?
Anna, you go.
Anna, you go first. Ladies first.
Yeah, I'm being a government right now.
Wow, that's a big question right now, especially given sort of what we're looking at over the next week or so. I want to see.
This is like ideal. This is your dream. This is what would make you smile as you go to sleep.
Yeah, I think right now, in this particular moment in time, it would just be a safer and more just world for kids.
Yeah.
And particularly kids of color and families of color.
Yeah.
Ricardo.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I think that and I know this is it's kind of like a cliche thing, but we really need to get serious about building a better world. We really do have. I think that if anything that we have learned in the past few years is that we just need to get committed to that, because there is no reason for it. There is really no reason for some of the injustices and suffering and stuff that is going on. It's just I don't know why we cannot get our act together. And so if in 10 years we can be a little bit better, a lot better, I think that will be extraordinary. That will make me smile for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, quite honestly, I think that one of the things that's going on right now is that for a while we've been heading toward a huge paradigm shift in everything because of the climate change and the advent of automation and the disappearing of labor, which is going to happen. Transportation jobs, when they disappear overnight because robots are driving the trucks and the trains, will put 15 million out of work immediately, and then automation will move through everything else. So labor as a concept is going to disappear. And so capitalism in the form that it's taken for centuries will have to disappear. It won't be the same. And no one has figured out what that means. And I think we're all terrified of it. And that's what's causing this level of anxiety and sort of lashing out. But if we can get the other side of that paradigm shift, I think it's going to be a wonderful world. I think we'll have more time to think about important things. Up to now, people haven't had time to think about social agenda and philosophies. It's been a privilege to have time over your gin and tonic to talk to friends about what needs to be fixed. If you're struggling to just put food on the table and do 5 jobs a day, you can't think about what a better society looks like. You're just struggling to survive. So I do think that we will get to a point where this conversation will be a more possible conversation. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool optimist. We just got a question about the kids, what age they are. Anna, for you, what's the sort of age range of the kids that RFK helps?
Yeah, for the most part, it's sort of adolescent into adulthood, so like 14 to 21. And then with some exceptions, some of our school grades go younger than that, but mostly sort of adolescent teen youth.
Right. What a great team working with Kids Tomorrow's Future. That's very nice. Adriana.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. Well, yeah, it is a great team. That's probably a really good place to wrap this up. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Ricardo, for being such a great team today. I've really enjoyed it enormously talking to you, Ricardo, and getting to know you better. And I hope that soon we'll be able to see each other in person.
Yeah, it'll be nice. And can I say something before we go, Charlie? You are so generous. You really are a very extraordinary human being. You're so generous. No, you really are so generous, so committed, so wonderful. And by the way, your career has brought so much joy to everybody watching here. So thank you for everything that you do, not just for RFK, but for.
Well, I appreciate it. I feel very blessed. I'm just very, very fortunate, as you say, to be given the opportunities that I was given. I'm always every day grateful for that, and grateful for everything that I've been allowed to achieve. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Ricardo, for that, and thank you, Anna, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. This has been a lot of fun. Another current conversation during the time of quarantine. Please tune in next month when we'll have another surprise guest. Stay well, stay safe, and have a great week. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Ricardo.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.